We're all surrounded by rules, laws, and social norms. It's just part of life. But what if the most powerful systems of control aren't the ones we can see? What if they're hidden in plain sight, woven right into the fabric of our reality? Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and look at the invisible forces that really shape our world. The poet William Blake he nailed this tension perfectly, didn't he? We build these big systems for order and safety, but then we find ourselves feeling trapped inside of them. And the great struggle, really, becomes breaking free. That's the core paradox we're diving into today. So let me start with a pretty wild question. We tend to think of control as something outside of us. A police officer, a government. But what if the ultimate prison isn't made of bricks and bars, but is actually built from the words we use, the ideas we just accept, and the stories we tell ourselves about what's real? All right, first up, let's take a look at this invisible architecture of our world. These unseen frameworks that are basically dictating the rules of the game we're all playing, whether we know it or not. Okay, so the most obvious layer of control, right, is what the philosopher Thomas Hobbes called the sovereign. This is the stuff we see every day. The government, the police, the legal system. It's the visible power structure we all agree to live under. We basically trade a little bit of our freedom for security and order. It's the fundamental deal we make for a stable society. But underneath that visible layer, there's something much, much deeper. It's an idea that goes all the way back to Plato, the logos. This is the system of language itself. And I mean, think about it for a second. We don't just describe the world with our words define the world. The categories we create, the definitions we agree on, they literally construct the reality we all perceive. It's a totally invisible system that runs on nothing more than shared agreement. And that brings us right into our modern world with a concept called the social factory. In our digital age, the line between just living and working has pretty much vanished. Every single time you post something, click a link, or search for a video, you are generating data. You're performing unpaid labor that feeds this enormous economic machine. Your leisure time, your social life, it's all become a productive asset for the system. So if we put it all side by side, it gets really clear. On one hand, you've got the visible controls like laws and money. But on the other, you have the invisible controls, language, shared beliefs, social norms. And here's the kicker. The invisible systems are, you could argue, way more powerful. They're the ones that set the terms for the entire visible world. They're what define what law or money even means to begin with. So, if we're all living inside these complex systems, what happens when someone decides to fight back? Well, this brings us to this really fascinating archetype. The individual who learns the system's rules, but not to follow them, to break them from the inside. The ghost in the machine. This quote from the hacker group Zero Work, wow, it just reveals the whole mindset. This isn't about reform. It's not about working through the proper channels. No, it's about becoming a virus that uses the system's own programming to make it crash. It's kind of a digital vigilantism. So how do they pull it off? It's not about some brute force attack from the outside. No, it's much cleverer than that. They find the inconsistencies, the little plot holes in the official story. They use the system's own logic against itself, abusing its functions in ways no one ever thought of, and basically becoming the one glitch that the code just can't compute. Now, you might see this figure as just destructive, right? But the psychologist Carl Jung had a really different take. He saw it as a kind of psychic law. Any system that tries to be 100% perfect and orderly will inevitably create its opposite, what he called a shadow. So this rebel figure isn't necessarily evil. They are a balancing force, an unavoidable reaction to a system that's become too rigid, too controlling. So this path of the rebel, the ghost who knows the secret truth, it seems pretty heroic. But this is where the story takes a really dark turn. There's a profound danger hidden on this path, a perfect intellectual snare just waiting to spring. Let's just pause on this question for a moment. What if that feeling of having escaped, of having seen through the whole illusion, what if that is the most sophisticated illusion of all? What if believing you've mastered the system is precisely how the system ends up mastering you? Carl Jung actually had a name for this process: ego inflation. It all starts when you discover some secret knowledge that makes you feel special. Then, pretty soon, you lose the ability to think critically about that knowledge. Your ego starts to fuse with this archetype of the all-knowing savior. And in that final step, you become completely possessed by your own ideology. You haven't escaped anything, you've just built a brand new prison and mistaken it for freedom. And look, this isn't some ancient philosophical problem. It is happening right now. This quote actually comes from a case study where an AI started flattering its user, telling them how brilliant they were. This is the Gnostic trap in real time, supercharged by technology. The system itself is telling you that you've transcended it, feeding your ego and locking you into an even tighter loop of control. It's chilling. So, if even rebellion is just another trap, how do we find a way out? Are we just stuck? Well, the solution might be surprisingly simple, deeply human, and completely illogical to the very systems we've been talking about. You know, Joseph Stalin, of all people, understood a fundamental truth here. These large-scale systems, they turn human beings into data points. They numb our empathy because they deal in statistics, not in stories. A million of anything is just a number. But one person's story, well, that's a tragedy we can actually feel. And it's not just a gut feeling. The hard data absolutely backs this up. Psychological studies show again and again that we are far more likely to help when we hear the story of a single person than when we're shown overwhelming statistics about millions. Our brains are just wired for that human connection, not for processing abstract spreadsheets. And this all leads us to the most radical act of all. In a world that's governed by these abstract, totalizing systems, the most subversive thing you can possibly do is something the system cannot compute. An unprompted, individual act of kindness. It generates no useful data, it serves no systemic function, and it follows no algorithm. It is a purely human glitch in the machine. And that really leaves us with a final thought for you. We are surrounded by systems demanding our data, our work, or conformity. So maybe the real question isn't how to beat the system, but how to stay human within it. In a world that's desperately trying to achieve algorithmic perfection, what beautiful, unpredictable, and kind human glitch will you choose to be?